So in terms of the factors, so I hear the lawyers in the audience saying, well, what about this? What about that? So here's one for you. So, it's cool that you moved to a new jurisdiction where you didn't know anybody, but you don't know anybody, and you could pull on the draw the jerk opposing counsel that's just going to litigate the crap out of the case. So,
and we do all the time.
And so you talk about safety valves. So, how, you don't tell us, the secret sauce, but conceptually, how do you deal with that in a subscription model? How do you protect yourself and protect the client, get them to the goal? How, in that instance, for example?
Two ways. One is sometimes we just take it on the chin. We do draw those lawyers sometimes. And I'm in this for the long haul. I'm trying to shine a light on a practice area that hasn't been working that well for clients and showing a better way. And I still see good in them.
Welcome to the Founding Partner Podcast. Join your host, Jonathan Hawkins, as we explore the fascinating stories of successful law firm founders. We'll uncover their beginnings, triumph over challenges, and practice growth. Whether you aspire to launch your own firm, have an entrepreneurial spirit, or are just curious about the legal business, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Founding Partner Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Hawkins. This is a podcast where I get to interview founding attorneys and other law firm leaders and hear about their journeys and some of the cool things that they're doing. And today's guest, I've been really looking forward to this episode. And I'll sort of give a teaser, but he has started a firm. He started many firms, but his newest firm is I'll call it a family law firm that does family law litigation type matters on a subscription fee model, which when I heard this, I was really blown away and a little skeptical, which I'm sure a lot of people are. But, and when I say subscription, I don't mean like some family law firms that do, I'll call it flat fee, sort of staged billing, which I know a lot of people are skeptical of that. So really looking forward to diving in some of this today. The guest is Christopher Anderson. I think he may have more than one law firm, but his family law firm is called New Leaf Family Law. So, Christopher, welcome to the show. Happy you can be here. And why don't you give a little bit of background? I know you've done a lot of cool stuff. You do a lot of cool stuff. You got your own podcast. Just give us an overview of you and your firm and what you do.
You bet. So, the podcast, may as well, since you mentioned it, is the Unbillable Hour. Welcome people to it. It's available on all outlets. But the firm, as you mentioned, I've launched several firms over my career, operating several now, and am on the board of many, many more. So, I really do love the business of law. And so, and kind of like, I've been a fan of John Maxwell since beginning my career in business, and have really strived to work my way up through his levels of leadership, and consider it part of my mission today to expand that leadership beyond my own firms. And that's why I sit on some boards. I serve as trusted advisor to many firms and help them solve a lot of the problems that I have faced and to get beyond them and to continue to manage their firms well, the goal being really just to serve our clients better. Well-run law firms serve clients better, and that is an important goal and mission. So, but you mentioned New Leaf Family. So, New Leaf Family Law is a project. It's an experiment, and a lot of experiments don't go well. This one has proven many hypotheses, and we keep testing things. So, we sat during, my partner and I, to whom I'm married, sat during the pandemic, and we're talking about how family law firms really could be better. Both she and I have been on the client side of going through family law situations and have observed the good and the bad, and quite honestly, the ugly. And so being a student of business, being a student of lean methodology and agile methodology, the Toyota way, and many other thoughts of how to solve problems in business. I said, hey, if we feel that way and we feel like we could do better, because that's kind of where we were headed. And I'd run a family law firm before, but I kind of did it just the old traditional way. We sat down and said, the first thing, if we think we can do it better, we got to really clearly define what's wrong. Because otherwise, if we don't know what's wrong, we'll fall in the same traps. So we did. And we founded New Leaf Family to be better. It was really fun to be able to, after practicing law for 30 years, sit down and create a new law firm, clean sheet, right? Just completely clean sheet, and say, what if we could start all over again? Because that's what we're doing. We do operate other law firms, but we didn't leverage them. We didn't leverage the brands. We didn't leverage anything. In fact, part of our experiment was we knew then that we were 5-ish years away from being empty nesters. And we said, where do we want to be once that happens? Let's do the law firm there. Because part of the experiment for me was, could we be successful with this model that we created by doing this root cause analysis and finding out what was really wrong in a place where we had no benefits, no referral sources, no people to help us, no office, no relationships with other lawyers, no membership of the bar, nothing, like just dropping in from outer space with a market that doesn't know what we're doing or who we are. Can we be successful? And the first answer actually was no. So we had our initial concept was to solve one of the problems that we saw, which is that people come into family law situations not knowing what they really want. And so we said, let's solve that problem first. Let's just do a thing where we help people figure out what they want. That failed. And it's my belief that it failed because people didn't know what it was, right? It's like imagine creating, let's see, what's a popular food today that nobody knew what it was. I'm just trying to think. Shawarma. Imagine going to 1950 and opening a shawarma joint on 2nd Avenue and 11th Street in New York City. Like, nobody would come in because they weren't looking for shawarma. Nobody knew what it was. And you had to introduce them to it. And once people knew what it was, then they'd go. I feel like I'm ranting a little bit, but
this is great.
I'm just kind of giving the origin story, right? So we said, okay, people don't recognize this. They don't know what it is. So let's take that piece, set it to the side for a minute, but incorporate it into, and we called that phase one, right? And we call it decisions. So, we created phase one, we launched phase one, decisions, and we got some clients, we helped them, but didn't get traction. But so we said, all right, let's try phase two, which we call transitions. And this is what most people would recognize as a family law firm, right? We're now attracting people that know they want to change and are ready for that change. And we're going to help them with that change, whether that change be a divorce, a separation, change in custody, even premarital agreement or prenup for most of the country, some sort of change. But we're going to take that phase one thinking and make sure it's part of it. So in other words, we went back and stayed true to our root cause analysis. Now I need to tell you what the root cause analysis showed us. The root cause analysis, after we asked why and asked why again and asked why again and asked why again, led to two very important problems that was causing family law to not serve clients as well as it could. One, absolute standout, and I think everybody kind of knows it, but they don't know what to do about it, is the billable hour. And particularly in a consumer-facing practice, particularly in family law, the billable hour runs contrary to excellent client service. Now, here's where all the lawyers get up in arms, and I understand, I probably would too, because we're all ethical. We're all called to this. This is a profession, and we can rise above the problems that the billable hour causes. But let me talk about what the problems are. The problem with the billable hour is that it becomes very, very clear to anybody who's paying attention that you can derive more money per client, more money per case, more money for your practice by uncovering more issues, more conflict, more drama, and lawyering it to the greatest extent possible. There are some firms, I won't name any, who actually have that as their policy. That, we will leave no stone uncovered, no issue unresolved, no matter untended to. The problem is we're dealing with consumers with very, very limited budgets. And this leads to the first problem, which is that the desire to do that, to be excellent lawyers, which is what we're talking about, that's what I just defined, runs contrary to the client's need. And that sounds weird, right? Like you're saying, what, you mean we should be not excellent lawyers for some clients just because they're of more limited means? And the answer is no. We need to be even more excellent. We need to remember what we are, because we're not just lawyers and attorneys at law, but we're counselors at law. And the billable hour sets up this conflict. And as ethical and noble as we may be, this leads to one of two things. One is that my colleagues are humans, all of them. And most of them are excellent lawyers, and most of them are excellent humans. Like, this is not to disparage anybody, but they are humans. And when that very powerful incentive is there, along with some ethical guidelines that say, be a zealous advocate for your client's interests, it leads to outcomes that are not necessarily in the client's big picture interests, right? Maybe their legal interests, but as a counselor at law, I got to think about their big picture interests. And so it leads to things like huge withdrawal rates, right? Attorneys across the country withdraw from their family law cases prior to completion at an alarmingly large rate. And this oftentimes leaves clients worse off than if they'd never hired a lawyer at all. And, so that's not in their interest. And it's also disheartening to lawyers. I mean, it's not fun to take someone's problems, load them up into your pickup truck and say, I'm going to solve these for you. And then, start driving down the road to solution. And then halfway, dump everything out of the truck because the client can't pay anymore. That doesn't feel good for the lawyer either. So, like, in this way, like, it's the whole hourly billing thing isn't serving anybody. And so we said we had to fix that. And then the second root cause was this notion, and I'm guilty as charged here. Most family lawyers are trial lawyers. I came to family law after being a prosecutor myself, and did other litigation trial work before going to family law. And so we come to that because when you're a good trial lawyer, we all have a sense of wanting to win. Right? That's the zealous advocacy thing again. But also just, we like to win. We don't like to lose. We'll put it the other way. And when you've got a client coming to you with a divorce, I don't know what winning is, right? Sometimes it's easy. The one spouse is abusive and has really put your client under their thumb, and you're really helping them escape a terrible situation, and it's clear that you're helping them move on to something better. That can feel like a win. But in most situations, there's already a loss. I mean, there's a lost family, there's a lost vision. Most of our clients, years before they met us, had a vision of the future that was very beautiful for them and that they loved, and it's gone. And so winning in that environment becomes very difficult to define. So we redefined it. So that's the second root cause, is as we said, we're not going to start from that perspective. We're going to start from the perspective of defining the client's future, and more clearly having the client define their future. So we're not going to talk about what motions we're going to file. We're not going to talk about strategy. We're not going to talk about all those things. We're going to talk about where you're going to live in 2 years. We're going to talk about where your kids are going to go to school. We're going to talk about where you work. What's your relationship with your ex-spouse? What's your relationship with his parents or her parents? What's your relationship with yours? What's your spouse's relationship with your parents? Where are the kids living? What's your relationship with the children? What's your spouse's relationship? All these things, big picture, detailed thing, because, and this is where I think a lot of family law firms get this wrong, most of our clients come to us running towards something or running away from something, but neither of those things being their future. They're running away from their past. They're running towards a present. And not nobody, some people are more self-aware, but very few people when we first ask them that question, they don't know the answer. They don't know it clearly. Because nobody's given them time to think about it and to hear it. And once you know the answer, now you know what winning might look like. But you know something even more important, which is the answer to the question that we ask with everything else we do from that moment forward, which is, does this action move our client closer to that goal? And if the answer is no, we don't do it. If doing discovery doesn't do that for them, we don't do it. If filing this motion doesn't move them towards that, we don't do it. If moving for contempt against their spouse doesn't move them towards that goal, we don't do it. If it does, we do. But it streamlines and, again, aligns the lawyers with the clients. So you take these two things, eliminating the billable hour and having basically what I call a coaching forward or future forward representation, changes everything. And it aligns us. It reduces withdrawal rates dramatically. It keeps clients in control of their future and the process, leads to happier clients and better outcomes. And that was our theory and our hypothesis. And, here we are now, 4 years and change later, almost 5. And I think the hypothesis is proving true.
So before you go into that, I just want to circle back on a couple things. Real quick, if you haven't gotten a copy yet, please check out my book, The Law Firm Life Cycle. It's written for law firm owners and those who plan to be owners. In the book, I discuss various issues that come up as a law firm progresses through the stages of its growth, from just before starting a firm to when it comes to an end. The Law Firm Life Cycle is available on Amazon. Now back to the show. So first, you don't sound like a typical lawyer.
Thank you.
Two ways, more than two, but the two I want to point out is, number one, you approach this as an experiment with a hypothesis, which in most lawyers, they're not open to that. They're like, this is the way it's always been done. That's the way I'm going to do it. So that's the first thing. And then the other one, you talk about root causes. That sounds more, first principles, Silicon Valley talk. And I'm curious, I think you've done some, stuff that's not law too. And I'm curious if you're just this way or if some of those other experiences helped you think differently than sort of a traditional lawyer. And you can go into some of the experiences if you want.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I think that's a great question. And by the way, when I said thank you, so you don't sound like a typical lawyer, I said thank you. I would say that that's not a ding on typical lawyers at all. It's a neurosis of mine that I don't do typical. And like we have a little joke with our kids. They're 22, 18, and 18 now. But from the time they were very little, if anybody said you're weird, the response was always thank you. And because I think the world's beauty is found in the weird, in the different, and progress is made by thinking outside the box. It's never made by doing things the way they've always been done. And I'm just a contrarian. So I will give you this that you said, is it just the way you're built? Contrarianness? Yeah, that's just the way I'm built. Yeah, from a very young age, just find out what would tick someone off or poke the bear. That was me, and it helps you learn about the world. But to your other question, yes, I out of law school, I worked to build legal software for mass tort businesses. I worked for New York City District Attorney's Office. I then helped to build other businesses. So I was constantly with one foot in business, one foot in the law, and always looking, again, to change things. I remember when I was in the DA's office, the district attorney, the elected district attorney, came by my office one day. It's like, this is 1996 or 7, maybe 1997. And he's like, what's that on your desk? I was like, that's a computer. It's like, I didn't authorize the purchase of any computers here. And I was like, you did not. You are correct. That is my computer. Where'd you get it? I bought it. And like, this is like a Windows machine. Like these were expensive. Like it was $3,000 that used. I bought this thing used. And he's like, what are you doing with it? And I told him but in the office, we had these books. And if you wanted to write a motion, you'd pull down these books and you were like, all right, I need a 22 and a 5 and an 18 and a 49 and then handwrite whatever custom stuff you'd put in it. And you'd send it out to the typing pool. And a day later, you'd get it back and it would be wrong and you'd make your edits and da-da-da. And so I'm telling him I'm putting all that stuff in to a program where I can do that myself much quicker and blah, 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 blah. And he's like, get rid of it. I was like, what? And he's like, that's amazing. Because I showed him what I was doing. You shouldn't spend your own money on that. I'm buying you one. And then, then I want you to show all the supervisors. And then we're going to buy them for everybody. That's just how I operate. It's like I was just a guy who didn't ask permission. I just did things. And sometimes I got in trouble. Sometimes it worked that way. But then really, so that was just my nature, right? But then really I got a couple of chances. One of the software companies that I was working with got purchased by Law.com, which is a division of American Lawyer Media. And so I got exposed to a much bigger world of business through that. That's my first exposure to Colorado because we got moved out to Colorado, joined up with a couple other businesses, and got my real first exposure to the business world and learned a lot from that. Later on down the road, I went back after that experience and opened another law firm in Georgia, was relatively successful with that. Unfortunately, I had elected to put about 2/3 of our eggs in the basket of residential real estate closings. And then Shearson Lehman happened, and then the Great Recession, and that was difficult. And initially, to help the law firm out, I took some outside work with LexisNexis. They were looking for. We used some of their software, and I was a constructive critic with a loud mouth of that software. But some of my ideas apparently had gotten higher and higher in the organization. I was invited to come talk to their product teams. Then I got invited to talk to their national sales teams, and blah, blah, blah. I started working for Lexis on a formal basis. And that's where I got exposed to notions of pragmatic marketing, which was you said some of these first principles ideas started to come in, and the Toyota way and that kind of stuff. And then to Lean, Agile, and Scrum. And then to the lean startup movement that was happening out in Silicon Valley at the time, Eric Ries and others. And this was just like, I heard angels sing when I would read this stuff. And I was like, this is the way. And then, of course, my brain starts going like, how could this work in law? And I started to formulate this and formulate this and formulate this. And so went from that to actually first helping other law firms with it. And then the pandemic, and we've got this idea. Let's do this. My wife, my partner, had already owned a law firm that did wage and hour work, but she's like, let's do that. I want to do this with you, and so we decided to do this. So I think that's a really long answer to the question, but I think it's important. I think to kind of where did these crazy ideas come from? Well, they came from these places that were just eye-opening and revelatory. I didn't invent these ideas. I just have applied them to law in a way that made sense to me.
So I do want to, as much as you're willing to share in terms of sort of the way that you charge the clients, the subscription model, I want to get into that. But the other thing that I think really impressed me and that really piqued my interest when we first talked was you wanted to, this goes back to the experiment thing. You're like, I'm going to move to a place and start this in a place where we've got no connections to really see if it works from a concept perspective versus it's just people that know me, they refer me stuff or whatever, which was cool. So you move to Colorado, you say, we're going to start this thing. And so I'll hand it back to you. I mean, there's really two questions and you can work it in however you want. Number one, you had to come up with sort of the billing model, and there's a whole host of things that go into that, I'm sure, iterations and whatnot. I'm curious how you came up with it. And then the other part is, how do you communicate that to the market in a way that people say, yeah, that's different. I want to hire you and try that versus sort of the historical model. How did you do both of those?
So the market's easy. It makes sense. It's how they buy everything else these days, right? So it makes total sense. It's how they're paid. That's what they can budget. What they can't budget is a retainer and an unknown replenishment at an unknown time. And I won't name any other firms, but the firms that are out there with these phase-based or flat-based fees are really in much the way that my BMW, I don't have a BMW. I used to have a BMW. This is why I don't have a BMW, why I now drive a used car. But, when I would go to the dealer, they had a flat fee when I would come in with a radiator problem. Radiator problem is $550. And I asked about it. I mean, I was curious, like, how did you do that? How did you know? And truth is, they have a book in the back. It says, well, all the things that go into this are this many hours, so that's how we're going to charge. And so, when I looked at that, because at first I did look at, let's do flat fee. That sounds like a good way to go. With flat fee this, flat fee that, just flat fee the different components of everything. As there are a couple, big firms out there that are doing that. But when you peel that back, that's just the billable hour again. It's all the same problems, right? Because more drama, more conflict, more problems, more issues, more money, exactly the way the billable hour works, because it truly is the billable hour. It's just the billable hour chunked up into discernible pieces. Rather than we don't call them hours. We call them, I'll charge you this to do your initial pleadings. You call them, I'll charge you this to show up for the initial conference. I'll charge you this to file this motion and that to file that motion. I'll charge you this for trial. It didn't address the root cause analysis. How you come up with the pricing is actually very simple. You acquire 30 years of experience, and then you use that experience to have a deep understanding of what it takes to deliver a family law case. And so what we did is we sat down again and we looked at that. We said, well, every case is different. Yeah, every case is different, but they fall into these levels of complexity. And if you just break them out into a certain number of levels of complexity, they start to look similar enough that on average, you can say this one, on average, the average total billable amount on this case would be X dollars. And on average, they sit on the desk from beginning to end for Y months. X divided by Y is a subscription. And instead of, and there are a couple of people out there that I've seen that are doing almost doing this. They're saying, well, the average case, the total revenues is usually X, and I'll charge that X over a certain number of months. But what we decided to do with a subscription is there are a lot of things we don't know. And so the subscription helps us when the case gets more complex. It tends to last longer. And so it tends to even out. There are a lot of nuances to this. We built in things to protect the client. We move almost all the risk to ourselves. So let's say, for instance, one problem with a subscription might be that there's a delay, right? And so now you're taking money month after month after month, and there's not much going on. We have a way to protect the client when that happens. We've developed a way to protect us if we get the complexity all the way wrong. And other things. So, and some of these things we've had to iterate, and we've learned. A lot of it we came up with from the very beginning, just based again on all that experience. We just started going over, well, what would it be like? I handled hundreds of cases in my prior career, and I then talked to some of my colleagues who'd handled hundreds of their own, and I said, so what, let's talk about some of these cases. What would have happened with this case? What would have happened with this case? What would have happened with this case? We just gamed it and gamed it and gamed it and gamed it and came up with an idea. And then I'll tell you what, I got it so very, very wrong. The first iteration, I was losing money hand over fist. And we had to learn. One of the ways we learn is that we still track time religiously. And we do it for two reasons. One, you mentioned, I think it was pre-show, but what do you do when there's a fee dispute? The arbitrators and then at the end of the day, the bar don't have much experience with subscription billing. don't even have that much experience with flat fee billing, though at least flat fee billing is in most of the states' adaptations of the model rules. Subscription billing is not. And then with flat fee billing, unfortunately, there is wide disparity with how states handle it. There are some states, I believe Illinois, which requires firms to, when they're doing a flat fee, to accept that fee into their operating account as earned fees. There are some states that forbid that. And then there's variations between. And so how do you navigate all that? And you navigate all that by still enabling yourself to speak the language that the regulators are going to use in making sure that you're treating clients fairly. And so we do, right? We track every hour, and we make sure that the clients know that they can ask for their hours, et cetera, et cetera. We never bill by the hour. But I shouldn't say never. We almost never. Once in a while, we'll take a case that is either wackadoodle, unpredictable, or most commonly, a lawyer will join the firm, bring some cases that they were under billable contracts, will honor them. But we track it. And so everything's above board. We all know that we're being fair. And like I said, we move all the risk to ourselves. So if there's a big delay or whatever, we have safety valves for the client to make sure they're protected. I think I lost track of what question I'm answering. So
Well, I've got another one. So in terms of the factors, so I hear the lawyers in the audience saying, well, what about this? What about that? So here's one for you. So, it's cool that you moved to a new jurisdiction where you didn't know anybody, but you don't know anybody, and you could pull on the draw the jerk opposing counsel that's just going to litigate the crap out of the case. So,
and we do all the time.
And so you talk about safety valves. So, how, you don't have to tell us, the secret sauce, but conceptually, how do you deal with that in a subscription model? How do you protect yourself and protect the client, get them to the goal? How, in that instance, for example?
Two ways. One is sometimes we just take it on the chin. We do draw those lawyers sometimes. And I'm in this for the long haul. I'm trying to shine a light on a practice area that hasn't been working that well for clients and showing a better way. And I still see good in them. And I can turn them from the dark side and bring them into the Jedi Order. I do. I just think that if you treat everybody the way you want them to treat you, I think it was it Bob Berg? I'm going to mess this up. But no, it was Jay Foonberg. Jay Foonberg, a legal author that was really instrumental in my early days of practicing law. Great guy. I read his books and came away with two key concepts that have served me all these years. One was, he said, paper your clients. Like for communication, any communication that goes in or out, copy them. Your clients want to know. And even if they don't want to know, they want to know you're thinking about them. And the other one was, when you write bills that clients want to pay by describing what it is you did in the language of why it was valuable for them, rather than, stood at copier, right? Drafted motion. They don't care. How did that serve them? But he came up with this thing called the platinum rule. Everybody knows the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And the platinum rule is do unto others as you would have them do unto others. Right? And I know I'm messing it up a little bit, but it's like another level up. So that's how. I mean, and it's sometimes hard. Man, it's hard. I'm a big fan of the Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. Sometimes I have to break it out and reread it with regularity, particularly the don't take anything personally aspect of it. And then we understood that on average, it works out. And we can take it in the chin once in a while I said there's two ways, because of way number two. At the end of the day, you just got to think about the whole model differently. Like, this is a different way to think about the business of law. So when you think about it this way, you have your different levels of complexity. And so let's say they range from 1 to 5. And so each case carries a number, 1 to 5. And then you say, well, a lawyer can carry, and this comes, this is a bastardization, but it comes from some of the Agile Scrum thinking about how to organize teams. You say a lawyer can handle 40 points, 45 points. I'm just making numbers up now. Nobody go model your business after the numbers I'm throwing out there. Just this is for concept. So let's say a lawyer can handle 45 points. So maybe they could handle 9-5 cases or 45-1 cases or a mixture. And I'm going to pay the lawyer a salary. Well, if a lawyer can handle 45 points and I'm paying them a salary, then I know my cost structure. So if I've got one pain in the ass, yeah, we're not on broadcast, right?
Yeah.
I could say ass. If we got one pain in the ass opposing counsel that chews up a case, it's okay. The lawyer still can handle 45 points. And so it doesn't break us on the cost side. And of course, the other trick is scale this thing, right? The bigger you scale it, the more lawyers you've got working, the less the outliers hurt, right? In the beginning, they did hurt. And in the beginning, I practiced too. And, I would draw some of these lawyers, and they hurt my soul. But because of the model, it's manageable.
So another thing you mentioned a minute ago, the time tracking and some of the reasons behind it. I'm curious, and we had this discussion pre-show. It's courts when you do a fee petition, all they know are hours. It seems like they can't even barely conceive of flat fees. Anything outside of the hours, they don't know how to deal with it. Subscription probably blows their mind. They don't know what to deal with.
And opposing counsels too.
Yeah, them too. And then you've got the bar regulators. And so because you are on the bleeding edge here of this concept for law, you're going to be pushing up against all these sort of external forces. And I'm curious, let's focus on the bar regulator piece. What sort of pushback or, what sort of issues, if any, have you encountered on that front?
Because, I anticipated this, fortunately, and tracked time from the very beginning, and am very familiar with and try to stay familiar with the rules of professional conduct. The rules of professional conduct have some underlying themes. And what I found from bar regulators is they're not out there to trip you up over a technicality. If what you were doing was right in spirit and there's no bar rule that covers it, and you've tried to figure out a way to keep things transparent and keep things fair, reasonableness of the fee is one of those major themes, then they're going to be okay with it. And they may have suggestions, and they've had suggestions, and we have followed their suggestions. We've also, because this was new, taken the step of hiring and having what we do reviewed by outside counsel who have experience with the regulators, and not just in our state, but in other states where we're now branching out. And so, we try to prophylactically, because the bar will never bless a fee agreement. They'll never say, yeah, you can do that. But, it's not fair to say that, they're only there to catch you when you do it wrong. That's not true either. They're helpful, but they're not in the business of being our outside counsel, right? We hire our own outside counsel. But that's been very helpful because, if you try to do things the right way, and you pay attention to things like fairness and reasonableness and transparency and candor, like you back to the court, the court fee, what would you call it? The court fee?
Like a fee petition or
fee petition, a fee award. So like when we do a fee petition or fee award for us or against us, we give them the truth, right? This is what we charge the client. Here's the fee agreement. And we give them the hours. We say, but, had we billed them by the hour, this is what would happen. Now, I keep things in such a way that across the board, we're almost always charging less than what the hours would suggest. And so that whenever we have to go through the process, through a petition or a fee dispute, the first thing we could do is stand tall and say, had we been hourly, here's what it would have looked like. And we never say, so cough up the difference, right? We never, ever, ever, ever go back on it. It's like, that is your benefit. But, just since we're talking about it, right? This is what it would have looked like. And we always keep track. And it's a pain, right? It's because you have to keep this whole team, all the lawyers, all the paralegals, keeping their time when they don't bill it. but it's just a rule, right? So we keep that stuff. But that's how we do it. I mean, we just candor and leading with candor and fairness and being unafraid of the consequences of, because if you can hold your head high and know you're not doing anything underhanded, nefarious, trying to pull a fast one or taking money you didn't really earn, then there's not much to be afraid of.
So,
except it's still, you're still always afraid.
yeah.
but we were, what's the word my grandfather used to use? We're living right. We're trying to live right.
So another aspect to this. So you've got, you, the leader, the innovator, came up with this. You've explained it to the market. They loving it. You've figured out a way to explain it to the courts and the bar regulators, et cetera, et cetera. Let's talk about recruiting attorneys and staff and training and retention. So how do you deal with that aspect of this model?
So again, I mean, I'm a pretty predictable guy, right? So it's the same way. Like, I don't invent different ways to do the different things. Candor, transparency, fairness. Everybody we hire, we review this system with them in the hiring process. And some people don't like it. Then they don't come work here. And that's okay. A lot of people who come work here look at this and say, I don't want to figure this out. Like, so they weren't looking for a job. Solo, like one of the greatest sources of new team members here has been solos or small firms who look at what we're doing and say, wow, I'd love to work in that environment. I don't want to invent it. And quite honestly, I'm sick and tired of marketing. I'm sick and tired of payroll. I'm sick and tired of compliance with regulations. Not OERC regulations, but we're talking about just like zoning and buildings and all this stuff. And I love practicing law, and this seems like a really great way to align my practice with the client's interests. And so they just come work with us, and we liberate them and help them to do that. But to answer your question, we're very transparent about the system, whether it's that solo that's coming over, or we're recruiting and actually hiring a lateral, or we also take we raise new lawyers too, so we take law clerks and raise new lawyers through the firm. And if it doesn't float their boat, they don't come. Like, there's no bait and switch, there's no trick. It's just a different way. And there, as you can imagine with me, there's a lot of things that are a different way. Our compensation structure is a different way. Our show up to work rules are different. Everything about this firm is different because, again, we got an opportunity. How many times do you get this in life, right? I didn't have to change my firm. I didn't have to evolve it. I didn't have to revolutionize it. I just started over with a clean sheet. Now, the firm that my wife and partner had started, it still operates. It's doing its own thing over there, but they don't interact. And so we really did have a clean sheet. We said we're just going to do things the way we want to do them, the way we think is right, and we don't have to fix or carry the baggage of the way that didn't work. So, and that goes with everybody that joins us. Like, this is different. Like, if you want different, this is different. And for our team, they love it.
So another question that personally I'm curious. So any firm or any business that's on sort of a subscription style model, you mentioned compensation. Traditional firms, you hit this amount of hours, you're going to get this sort of incentive comp. If you originate this, you get this, blah, blah, blah. The traditional elements that law firms sort of base incentive comp on. If I'm out there thinking about doing a subscription model, what are some ideas or some ways to think through, incentive comp above salaries?
So their origination is still a real thing. So we still do that, right? And then it's around client happiness. So we have a way of scoring that. And it's around caseload. So, I said, I threw out that kind of bogus number, but, going back to that concept, right, saying a typical lawyer can carry 45. And so we just say, listen, if you carry, if the number's 45, which it's not, if you carry above 40, for every number above 40, there's incentive. And by carry, it's, that they stay current on their subscription and that you work the case. And if you go above 50, we turn it on we turn the gas up high, and your variable comp goes higher. But the cool thing is we actually are trademarking this. We call it the Write Your Own Adventure compensation plan. And because we also have some lawyers who are with us that like, I've got a family, I need to bring home a check, but I don't want to maximize bonuses. I want to know what it takes to stay here and to do an excellent job for the clients. And I don't want to do much more than that. And they can do that too. So we have this incredibly flexible comp plan. So we've got lawyers making a lot of money because they really want to maximize income, and we've got some lawyers that really want to maximize lifestyle, and that's okay. The only challenge, and again, we learn as we go. The only challenge with that is that we've had to restrict the number of times you can change your mind in a year. So once a year you can change your mind as to how you want your comp to work. But so we replace hours again, because that's not what we do, with things that matter to the clients. How many of them can you carry, and can you keep them happy? Very important part of it.
Okay, so I want to shift gears a little bit. So you mentioned earlier, and we talked about it, you also coach and maybe consult with the law firms and lawyers. So I want to talk a little bit about that, but also tying into the subscription. Do you coach firms on maybe how to design these things to fit different practice areas if they want?
Yes, absolutely. I work with a couple dozen law firms across the country. I think we're up, anyway, in various aspects of their businesses. So not just how to build this, but how to market it. But not, and again, my consulting work, and I tend to do more consulting than coaching. My consulting work is focused on where they want to go. I'm a boring guy. Every consulting job starts the same way I just talked about with the law firm. Where are you? Why are we talking? Where do you want to go? Right? What are we trying to change? And if it happens to be that they want to build a subscription model, that's fine. That's not the most of my clients. I got to tell you, I'll be honest, and with all your listeners, this is not for the faint of heart. Be building a subscription model. Because the way I do it here, I've learned a lot. And there's, if I had to do it all over again, I would do things very differently. And so I always tell people, don't say, how did you get there? Then you'll follow those tracks. Don't do that. Let's show you a way where you don't fall down that shaft as you walk through the fields. And it's just not for the faint of heart. And if you don't have the data, right? I had a lot of data, but I don't have a lot of data for Montana. I don't have a lot of data for Florida. You have to be willing to learn those lessons. But so really, when I start with anybody, it just starts with, where are you? Why are we talking? Where do you want to be? And then I assess, kind of like the same thing with the family law model. Like, what can I do? Can I help, first of all? And how hard is it going to be to help you? And then we start to work from that perspective. I only tend to work, so my criteria for clients I work with are clients that want to grow relatively fast. And that they're starting from a place where they can afford to work with someone like myself, and that they want to grow fast, because that's what I do. I don't do static management. There's a lot of people who do it, and it's not, and that's not poo-pooing it. A lot of firms who are happy with where they are in their general market and their general revenue level and their general size, but wish they were more profitable, or wish that they weren't as tied to the business, or wish that they had better management with their employees and less turnover. Those are all other things that are really important too, and I recommend other people for them, because just what jazzes me is growth. I love helping law firms grow. And if that's what they want, then I'm their guy.
As I think about subscriptions, we'll tie it back to that, is a family law or a litigation practice is probably the most difficult. You may disagree with me, but in my mind, it seems like that's the most challenging type of practice to implement a subscription into. If you can do that, you can probably do it anywhere.
And not to interrupt you, but that's the two I have. I've done subscriptions with business representations as well. I did that before the family law one, and that was lots of fun. And
so for your consulting firm, the firms you consult with, and you maybe help this implement subscription or the other services you provide, it's not just family law firms, correct? It's any type of firm?
Correct. Yeah.
So any firm that just wants to grow.
Yep. I've worked with estate planning firms, medical malpractice firms, family law firms, business law firms. I'm trying to think of, and like I'm looking at all the clients. But yeah, it's. I don't need to know your practice area. Like my medical malpractice firms, like I don't know the medicine. I couldn't jump into court and prosecute a medical malpractice case. Criminal defense has some of the other ones, but that's not important. Like I understand your business model and I understand how the inside of the firm works. That's where I help. I'm not there to help you be a better lawyer. Most of my clients, I presume, are just fine in that regard.
So we're coming up almost on our time here. I have one more question, and then we'll wrap up. And
you bet.
For law firm owners out there that are anywhere in their journey, you can pick a place. But any low-hanging fruit or any advice that you would give them if they want to grow? Well, let's just say they want to grow. They don't want to maintain. What's top 1, 2, 3 pieces of advice you'd give them?
The first one is, again, I hope I'm not being repetitive on your show, but this is so important. Like, it's so critically important. Like, nothing else really matters is why. Why do you want to grow? And if it's a financial reason, like I just want more money because I want a Bugatti, that's fine, right? Most of the clients I start working with don't know the answer to that question. Again, just like the family law clients, right? I say, I'm so boring, but then, so that's where we spend our time. And the more they spend that time before they meet with me, the better, because then we can get a little bit further, a little bit deeper. And the clients that are the most fun to work with are those who have a different reason than their own personal lifestyle. I'll work with the personal lifestyle ones. I've helped people achieve some pretty extraordinary lifestyles. That's not what drives New Leaf Family. We're trying to change the way that people resolve disputes, that consumers resolve disputes in America. That's what we're trying to do. We think it's broken, and we think that a society that does not have a populace that believes that there's an effective way to resolve disputes is a society that's in trouble. And if we look around us, we may think that that's one of the reasons we're where we are. And we think, I'm not a politician. This is my contribution, is helping families and others believe that they have access to a process and to legal advisors who can help them resolve their disputes in a better way. But so, bringing it back to your question, it's the same question for why you want to grow. If you've got a big reason like that, even better. If you've got a medium-sized reason, that's okay too. Like whatever, but we just got to be clear on that why, because growth requires change. And humans, we're not that good at that. We're not built to be. We have this thing in our brain called an amygdala that is hardwired into our most basic way of thinking to avoid change. That's its job. Because where, the amygdala is just in there going like, well, whatever we've been doing hasn't killed us. Don't know that about the new stuff. So let's just keep doing, that's so hardwired into us. So in order to move on from that, we've got to have a powerful reason. So, I'm not getting all Simon Sinek on us, but we got to get to the why you want to grow first. And that's the big one. And everything falls from there. Then I think it's also important to know what you're not willing to do. I'm not willing to work 50 hours a week. I want to work only 30. I'm not willing to try a new practice area. I'm not willing to open another office. I'm not willing to hire new people. That's a big one I get. Like, I don't want to manage any more people. So knowing why you want to grow and knowing what you're not willing to do are two really good things to start with. But the rest, that's the art, baby. And that's I should write a book. Probably will. But other than that, the people I work with are such individuals that I would hate to paint with a broad brush. But everybody's got to know why.
Well, if you write the book, let me know, because I'll be the first one to buy a copy. So, Christopher, thanks for coming on. I want to plug your podcast again, Unbillable Hour. I remember that, I've been into podcasts forever, but this one's been around. I looked it up. I mean, at least 15 years, I think. I mean, I think so. That's impressive, And when you started it, it was a lot harder to do a podcast back then than it is today. Way easier. Still, Still takes work, but so 15 years, that is impressive consistency. So kudos to that. Everybody out there, if you haven't checked it out, you go check out Unbillable Hour. Really good podcast. What's the best way if somebody wants to get in touch with you, maybe to get on your list for consulting or ask you whatever, refer you a case, or maybe even say, hey, how can I join your firm? What's the best way to find you?
You bet. If you'd like to have a discovery call with me, just to consider working with me, or just opine your future, you can reach us, Christopher at sunnysidelaw.com. Or you can check out sunnysidelaw.com. It's a very rudimentary website because we honestly just don't do much with it. So just reach out, Christopher at sunnysidelaw.com. When I reach back to you, there'll be a link we can schedule. If you're interested in working with New Leaf Family in Colorado or elsewhere, we are opening in other states. 2026 is a big expansion year for us. We are opening offices, and our favorite way to do it is to find a lawyer who just wants to practice law, who would like to join the firm, and you'll train with our team or whatever. Just reach out to me, again, Christopher at newleaf.family. And those are the two best ways to get with us. Obviously, you can check out our websites at newleaf.family and learn more about the firm before you do that, or not. Just jump on and we'll schedule a time to chat.
Well, Christopher, again, thank you for coming on. I'm really, really intrigued about what you are doing and what you've done. I think that's just really, really cool stuff. So thanks for coming on and sharing it with me and sharing it with everybody else.
Thanks. My absolute pleasure. It's been a delight, and thank you for having me on the show.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Founding Partner Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date on the latest episodes. You can also connect with Jonathan on LinkedIn and check out the show notes with links to resources mentioned throughout our discussion by visiting www.lawfirmgc.com. We'll see you next time for more origin stories and insights from successful law firm founders.